Hare Krishna. So we will resume our discussion on the second chapter from verse 12. That's a famous verse. Na tvevam jatu nasham na tvam neme janadipaha na chevyana bhavishyama sarve vayam taha param. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So, this is one of the very important verses in the Bhagavad-gita, not only because it is the first teaching of Krishna to Arjuna as a disciple, but also because it carries within it the very foundation of real spiritual endeavor. There are four important points that Krishna makes in this verse. One, that the soul is eternal. So in the verse he is talking about past, present and futures. There never was there a time past, right? Nor in the future will we cease to be. And the present is empirical. They are obviously existing in the present. So the point that he is making is that the soul is existing in the past, present and future, which makes it eternal. Then the second is that the soul is distinct and individual. Right? So Krishna is making this distinction between, he's saying that you, the kings, me, we have always are existing and will exist in the future. Right? So that individuality is carried to the past, present and future. And this essentially smashes the Mayavadi doctrine that the individuality is temporary. Right? So their proposition is that God is impersonal, Brahman, energy, right? And just consciousness. And at some point of time, a piece of Brahman gets separated, gets covered by Maya, and becomes an individual jiva. And when the jiva is liberated, it goes back and merges into this impersonal Brahman. Right? So their proposition is that from impersonal comes personal, and personal goes back to impersonal. But in this verse, Krishna is clearly saying that the soul was distinct and individual in the past, is currently distinct and individual, and will always be distinct and individual, regardless of whether it is conditioned or liberated. So, second important point. Third, Krishna is saying that just like Arjuna and the kings are individual and distinct, so is he. Right? So that's why he says, there was a time I did not exist. So this proposition is being applied to him also. That Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is an individual and he is forever distinct. So there is no accommodating the fact that somebody can merge into Krishna or merge out of Krishna, because Krishna is an individual. He always is distinct. Just like the jiva is eternally distinct, Krishna is eternally distinct. And the fourth point, which is derived, is that even though Krishna has appeared in the material world in a human-like form, he is always God. He never becomes conditioned. Prabhupada says that if the descent of Krishna in the material world subjects him to conditioning, then there is no point in reading the Bhagavad-gita, because it is spoken by another conditioned soul. And everything spoken by conditioned soul by nature is contaminated by one of the four defects. So, it is as good as any other piece of material literature. But the fact that Krishna is instructing Arjuna, he has taken the position of instructing Arjuna means that he is not conditioned, he is not illusion. So God is always God, whether he's in the spiritual world, whether he's in the material world, whether he's in a human-like form, whether he appears like a fish or a tortoise or a hog, any form that he appears in. God is always God. He never becomes conditioned. In the Katha Upanishad, there's a nice verse, Prabhupada quotes that very often, that makes this distinction between Krishna and the Jivas. Nityo Nityanams, Chetanas Chetananam, Eko Bahunam Yo Vidati Kaman. So Nitya Nityanam. That amongst the eternals, there is one eternal. Chetanas Chetananam, amongst the sentient, there is one sentient entity. And what is the unique characteristic of that one? Eko Bahunam Yo Vidati Kaman. That one entity is fulfilling the desires of the millions of other entities. Right, so that is Krishna. Jivas are eternal, Krishna is eternal. Jivas are sentient, Krishna is sentient. But the Jivas are dependent on Krishna, Krishna is fully independent. Right? So this verse is key in establishing the philosophical basis of Vaishnava theology. And everything unfolds from this conception. So that's why this verse is considered to be one of the key verses in the Bhagavad-gita. Okay, let's move on to the next verse, 13. Okay, verse 2:13. Dhenasmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantra praptira dhiras tatra namoyati. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So another very, very famous verse, another verse that is very often quoted by Prabhupada. In this verse, Krishna addresses Arjun's concern of killing Bhishma and Drona. So in 2.4, he had said, how can I kill Bhishma and Drona? So Krishna basically uses extrapolation. So he presents an empirically verifiable fact and then extrapolates it to make a point. So what's the verifiable fact that is presenting? That the body is continuously changing. This we have experienced in ourselves, we experience it around us. Right? So it is empirically verifiable. That a child is born, becomes a boy, a youth, then middle-aged, old age. Now, the body is continuously changing, but the person is not really changing. Right? We keep addressing the person as the same, with the same identity, because the soul is still the same. So the extrapolation is that just like the body changes but the soul remains the same in this life, at the time of death, the same thing happens. That the body changes and the same soul now takes on another body. Now, how is it relevant to Arjun's concerns? Krishna is saying that you are concerned about killing Bhishma and Drona, but factually speaking, the bodies of Bhishma and Drona have always been changing. So death will simply be a continuation of the change that has been happening since the time they took birth. So now Arjun might say, true. But when the body is changing, the personalities are remaining the same. I have attachment to the soul occupying Bhishma's body. If I were to kill him, then Bhishma's body will be left behind and the soul will go to some place that I cannot see. So, so Krishna's response to it is that you are not lamenting the destruction of Bhishma's body now. So when Bhishma from a child became a youth, his body of childhood was destroyed. And similarly, from youth he became a young man, and became an old man, his body changed. So you did not lament that. Now, while the body was changing, Bhishma and Drona were also changing. Like the person who is a child, he acts differently from a person who is a youth. He acts differently from a person who is old. There may be some characteristics that they may be common, but you can't expect an old person to act like an infant, or vice versa. So the point that is made is that the change of the body is inevitable. The change of the body is continuous. And a person who is able to see this, Krishna says, dhirastatrana muyati. He does not become bewildered. So Prabhupada says that in the purport, that the Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into fragmental portions. Right? So these fragmental portions are eternally so, which means they are always eternally fragmental. And even after liberation, the individual souls remain the same, fragmental. Right? Which means that even after death, the soul of Bhishma will remain the same soul. That identity is not going to be lost. So, there is no need for lamentation. So, in this way, Krishna is addressing Arjun's concerns about him killing Bhishma and Drona. Because everybody who is born is dying. Now again, all this has to be taken in the context of in the execution of one's dharma. Right? One should not say that, okay, everybody is dying, I killed the person, so I'm just participating in the process. Right? Prabhupada gives the example of when a soldier kills on the battlefront, he's given a medal. And when he comes back at home and kills somebody, he is executed. Same act, different consequences. One is supported by the dharma. It's a soldier's dharma to fight and kill the enemy. But it is not his dharma to come and kill within the country. So all these statements, even though that point is not reiterated again and again, but one has to understand it is in the context of that while executing your prescribed duties. If you kill somebody, then that person is you're not killing that person because the soul can never be killed and the body can never be saved. So do your duty. Okay, so let's move on to the next verse. 214. Matrasparshastu kaunteya shito sana sukha dukkadaha agma payano nityasa tam stitikshasva bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and the disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So this is a companion verse to the previous verse, where Krishna told Arjun that by nature's own course, the death of Bhim and Bhishma and Drona and everybody else is inevitable. So you should not lament. Now, in response to that, Arjun may say that philosophically I accept that when I kill Bhishma and Drona, they will get another youthful body. The spirit is eternal. But from a practical perspective, I will be immediately deprived of their association. So he says, I experience happiness when I associate with them, when I talk to them, when I get their blessings. And when I am deprived of that, that pain of separation is real. Philosophy is in the mind, but I will actually experience that pain of separation. So in this verse, Krishna acknowledges, saying, yes, you are right. There will be the pain of separation, but you must learn to tolerate this pain without being disturbed. Right? So previously he said, Dhiras tatra na moyati. That a dhira is one who does not get bewildered. So what is the characteristics of the dhira? This is the characteristics of the dhira, that the person is not disturbed by the appearance of happiness or distress or the disappearances. He simply learns to tolerate them, just like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. Why? Because he understands that they are simply the result of the engagement of the senses with the sense objects. So it is an external experience. It's not an experience that is intrinsic to the soul. So this verse essentially places the execution of one's duty at a higher platform than one's own personal happiness and distress. So what Krishna is telling Arjun, that in the course of the execution of your duty, you will inevitably experience happiness and distress. But know that this is only the result of the engagement of the senses with their objects. It's transient. So learn to tolerate that. What is not tolerant is the principles of dharma. And one should always be willing to sacrifice the temporary to uphold the permanent. To sacrifice the transitory happiness and distress of the senses in order to uphold the eternal principles of dharma. That's a very important point that Krishna makes over here. And if you notice, at the same time, he is also talking about the nature of the soul and its relationship with the body. Right? So he's instructing Arjuna on both fronts. Prabhupada gives a very nice example of how duty trumps over personal comfort and discomfort. Right? He says that according to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magh, January, February. It is very cold at that time. But in spite of that, a man who abides by the religious principle does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest part of the summer season. Now, these statements are obviously made before there were hot water showers and there was air-conditioned kitchen, but it does not mitigate the underlying point that is being made. That one executes one's duty in spite of inconvenience. So for Arjun, the inconvenience is being deprived of the association of Bhishma and Drona. And the reality is that by doing so, he will uphold the principle of dharma. So Prabhupada notes that Krishna addresses Arjun by two different names. He addresses him as Kaunteya to signify his relationship. So we talked about it that Arjuna is the son of Kunti, who is the aunt of Krishna. So signifying Krishna's affection to Arjuna because of this relationship. And then he also addresses him as Bharat. So Bharat means a descendant of Bharat, an ancestor in the Kuru Vansha. So he's saying that you come from a great heritage. And coming from such a great ancestor, it's your responsibility to execute your duty regardless of your personal whims and fancies. Okay, let's move on to the next verse. 215. Yam hina vyathayante purusham purusharshava sam dukha sukham dhiram somratatvaya kalpate. O best among men, Arjun, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. So, in the previous set of verses, Krishna has glorified the execution of the prescribed duties, even if it is resulting in this duality of happiness and distress. He has glorified the person who is equal to happiness and distress in the execution of dharma. And it's interesting to note that happiness and distress are kind of dealt similarly. One might say, what's the problem in being happy in the execution of your duty? The problem is that if one is guided by one's desire to be happy, then one will avoid those prescribed duties that cause distress. So equanimity in duality is important. And this actually is one of the recurring steadfast themes in Bhagavad-gita. Being equal in all situations. Right? And this is a theme that Krishna introduces right up front. As soon as he starts to instruct Arjuna, he has introduced this, and it's something that he will continue to develop till the very last verse of the chapter. Okay, so here again he says that a person who is undisturbed by happiness and distress. Right. So Arjuna might say to Krishna that you keep telling me to be equal in happiness and distress, but why should I not seek out happiness? It is the nature of all the living entities to seek happiness. So Krishna in this verse, for the first time, he introduces a higher purpose. Right? So he says that sam dukha sukham dhiram so mritatvaya kalpate. So amritatvaya means liberation. This is what you will get. Right? So two propositions. Either you indulge yourself in temporary material pursuit of happiness and distress, which will come and go, but is always temporary. But if you choose to transcend it in the performance of your prescribed duties, you will attain liberation. Right? So there is nothing, so Krishna is the most magnanimous person. There is nothing that he will ask us to do without rewarding us many, many times over for that. Right? So in this, Krishna is saying to Arjuna, you perform your duty and be indifferent to the happiness and distress that comes out of it. And if you do so, here is what you will get. You will get liberation. So by performing prescribed duties, which is karma as per dharma, one gets knowledge, which is jnana, which will lead to moksha, liberation. So Krishna addresses Arjuna as Purusharshava, O best among men. Right? So he's saying that you are the best among men. And the best among men is also the Dhira. So Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to become a Dhira. 216. Na shato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate satah, ubayor api drishtantas, tvanyos tattvadarshibhi. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. So Krishna is now going to speak more about the distinction between the body and the soul. Right? He has given some instructions on that premise that there's a difference in the body and the soul. Now he becomes more analytical in order to help Arjuna and help us see the distinction between the body and the soul. Right? So two distinctions are made in this verse. One is that the material body is always changing. And the second is that the soul is never changing. Right? So the material body is asat, temporary, and the soul is sat. It is permanent. Right? And then Arjuna might say, I can see the first part. I can see that the material body is changing, but I don't know about the soul. Right? And so Krishna says, Tvanyos tattvadarshibi. You have to accept this on faith. Right? So he says that those who are the seers of truth have concluded by studying the nature of both. So the point that was made earlier on is that there is faith that is mandated in accepting these instructions. So Arjuna can see that the material body is changing, but he cannot see that the soul is not changing. Right? And actually there are some philosophical doctrines that say that the soul also changes. They're deviant. But Krishna here is saying is that accept this on faith from those who are knowledgeable, those who are seers of the truth, right? Tattvadarshibi, right? People like him, Krishna himself, or the acharyas or the scriptures. So there are two kinds of distinctions. First is between the material body and the spirit soul that Krishna has highlighted over here. The material body is always changing, the spirit soul never changes. And because the material body is always changing, it is destructible. Its destruction is inevitable. And because the spirit soul never changes, it is eternal. So that distinction is made. And this leads to the next distinction, which is the relationship between the spirit, soul, and Krishna himself. So Krishna is not speaking about that right now. He will speak about it later, a little bit in the 4th chapter, but essentially from the 7th chapter. But he's laying the foundation for that. Right? He's saying that at least for now, understand that this is the relationship between the body and the soul. The body is temporary and the soul is eternal. Okay, so let's go on to the next verse. Okay, verse 217. Avinashi tu tadvidi yena sarvam idam tatam vinasham avyayasyasya na kaschit kartam arhati. That which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. So this verse, it clarifies the meaning of the previous verse. So in the previous verse, two propositions were made, that the soul is eternal and the body is temporary. Now in 217, the nature of the soul is described, and in 218, the nature of the body is described. So what is the nature of the soul? It is said that it is indestructible. Like two things are mentioned, that it is avinashi, right? That it is imperishable, and that it pervades the entire body, right? So the reason that this point is made, because one may object that how can you say that the same soul can occupy the body of a minute insect and the body of a whale, because the whale is much, much larger. So it is reasonable to expect that the soul of a whale has the shape like a whale, and the soul of an insect has the shape of an insect. So in order to negate that, Krishna, he says that yena sarvam idam tatam. So tatam, which means pervades. Pervades means that while staying at one place, it acts by its influence. Like there is a bulb in the room, and when the bulb lights up, the entire room is illuminated. It's so one does not assume that there are bulbs all over the room, but the light of the bulb pervades the room. Similarly, the soul is unique, and actually it is noted that the soul resides in the area of the heart, where it is floating on the pran, 5 kinds of air: prana, pan, vyan, saman and udan. So these are the life airs on which the soul is situated. And because of its nature, it is spreading its influence all over the body of the embodied soul. And the soul itself is minuscule. Right? In the Shvetashvar Upanishad, it is said that Balagar Shatabhagasya, that if you take the tip of a hair and divide it into 100 parts, and Shatada Kalpitasya cha, that you take the one of that 100 part and Bhagajiva, is that you divide it further into 100 parts. So essentially what it means is that you take the tip of a hair and take 1,000th part of the tip of the hair, Sachanyate Kalpate. But you can imagine the jiva to be that size. Now one may say that in the current day and time, there are microscopes and instruments that can actually enable us to even see one thing, something that is as small as a 10,000th of the tip of the hair. But the understanding from this verse is that the soul is invisible. So it is spiritually visible, but materially invisible. Right? And the verse uses a material notation just to indicate that it is smaller than the smallest. So what is the smallest that you can imagine? The tip of a hair. What is even smaller than that? 1/100th of the tip of the hair. What is even smaller than that is 1/10,000th of the tip of the hair. And the soul is even smaller than that. So another way of saying that the soul does not really have a material existence. It has a completely spiritual existence. So this verse is essentially clarifying about the spiritual nature of the soul. The next verse will talk about the nature of the body that it occupies. Okay. Verse 18. Antavante me deha nitya sokata sharirana anashino aprameyasya tasmad yudhasva bharata. The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, An eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharat. So the previous verse had spoken about the nature of the soul. This verse talks about the nature of the body and contrasts that the soul is indestructible. The material body is destructible. The soul is eternal. The material body is temporary. So, based on this understanding, Krishna is telling Arjuna that you should do your duty and fight. So this verse also reverses Arjuna's arguments based on compassion. That by not fighting, he said that he will save his family members from harm. But factually speaking, the material body of each and every one of his family members will certainly, inevitably come to an end. And their souls will never be destroyed. Right? So there is nothing that Arjuna can do to save the body, and there is nothing that Arjuna can do to destroy the soul. Right? So the compassion that Arjuna is manifesting is misdirected. Another point that is derived is that the spirit soul acquires a body for the purpose of enjoyment. Also for the purpose of liberation. That when through the body the soul executes the principles of dharma, one attains liberation. So therefore, both earthly enjoyment as well as liberations are attained through the execution of dharma. So when Krishna is asking Arjuna to follow his Kshatriya dharma and fight, he will attain both. He will attain enjoyment as well as he will attain liberation. So this reverses Arjuna's point of enjoyment, where he says, whom will I enjoy with if everybody is killed? Factually speaking, by following his dharma, enjoyment is guaranteed. And then Arjuna has said that I will be contaminated with sinful reactions. Krishna is saying no. By the following of your dharma, you will actually attain liberation. And the third direct point is that just like Arjuna, by engaging in his duty, will become elevated, the same thing will happen to Bhishma and Drona. That when they fight, following their own Kshatriya dharma, then everything that is being promised to Arjuna is also attained by them. So, the following of one's own dharma and helping the others to follow their dharma is ultimately beneficial for everybody. Okay, so moving on to the next verse. Verse 19. Yaenam veti antaram yaschanam manyate hatam ubhautau na vijanito nayam hanti nahanyate. Neither he who thinks the living entity the slayer, nor he who thinks it slain is in knowledge. For the self slays not, nor is slain. So this is a summation of the points that Krishna has made since he started speaking to Arjuna from verse 12 in this chapter. So the point that is being made here is that the soul is indestructible and eternal. So the living entity cannot be slain. Now Krishna at this point is also introducing the notion of the soul not being implicated in the actions of the body. Right? Because he says that the soul is neither the slayer nor is the soul slain. Right? So the soul not being killed we can understand, because we accept the premise that the soul is eternal, indestructible, cannot be killed. But then one might still say that the soul that is in Arjuna's body is doing the killing. So there is that implication. And Krishna at this point is stating it as an axiomatic truth. He will later explain more that why is it that the soul is not the doer. The whole principle of who is the doer is one of the key aspects of tattva that is expanded in the Bhagavad-gita. That who is actually doing the action. But here Krishna is stating it axiomatically. That just accept it that the soul is not doing the killing. So in the Katha Upanishad there is the statement that is made that if the killer thinks that he kills or the killed person thinks that he has been killed, both do not know the nature of the soul. The soul does not kill, nor does the soul get killed. Right? So this essentially negates Arjun's doubt about his fear of infamy. So Arjun said that I will be criticized by everybody of having killed my own guru and grandfather. And Krishna is saying that the people who are in knowledge understand that neither will the soul kill nor will the soul be killed. And those who are ignorant, why you don't have to worry about them. So there is no danger for you to be scared of infamy. Prabhupada in the purport says that this, however, does not at all encourage killing of the body. The Vedic injunction is Ma himshyat sarvabhutani. Never commit violence to anyone. Nor does understanding that the living entity is not killed encourage animal slaughter. Killing the body of anyone without authority is abominable and is punishable by the law of the state as well as by the law of the Lord. Arjun, however, is being engaged in killing for the principles of religion and not whimsically. So important point made by Prabhupada here. Okay, next verse. Okay, verse 220. Najayate mriyate vakadachinhayam bhutva bhavitavan bhuya ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano nahanyate animana sharire. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. So through these verses, Krishna is reinforcing the point that he earlier on made about the fact that the soul is eternal. Right? So this is a branch of logic which basically encourages emphasis through repetition. That if a point is important, then to emphasize the importance of the point, it is repeated in more than one ways. Like if you want to say that it's very important that you mail your taxes by April 15th, right? And then to emphasize it, you can say that taxes that are mailed after April 15th will be subject to penalty. Or you can say that the IRS will not accept taxes mailed after 15th April. Or you can say in order to stay within the legalities, you have to mail the taxes by April 15th. So same point, but in different ways it's being made for emphasis. So Krishna has already made this point that the soul is eternal. Now he's making it through more propositions, right? So he says, Na jayate mriyate vakadachin, that the soul does not take birth or die, which means that in the present time there is no possibility of the birth and death of the jiva. Then he says, Nayam bhutu bhavita na vana bhuya, that the soul will not take birth and death in the future, and the soul has not taken birth and death in the past. So in the past, present, or future, there has never been a birth or death of the soul. Like some people say that if the soul came into existence, it should have taken birth at some point of time. Right? But the point is negated, because if there is a point of origin, that contradicts the eternality of the object. So in this universe, just like Krishna is eternal, the soul is also eternal. There is no point of time when the soul did not exist, and there will not be a point of time when the soul will cease to exist. So it is unborn, aja in the past, present and future. It is shashvat. Shashvat means that it has been existing since time immemorial. It is nitya. It is eternal. So one might say that if the soul is existing for a very long time, does not it grow old? Because that's our experience. That as one lives longer and longer, one becomes older. Right? So the negation is that no. So it is said ajo nitya shashvato yam purano. So purano means Puran means that it is ancient. Purna also means it is complete. That the soul is always complete in itself. So growing old means that there are some things that you lose. Like as we have experience of growing old, we lose our vitality, we may lose our muscular body. So there are different things that we might lose. But the soul is always Purna. It is always complete. And it is also Purana. It is also ancient. But it is always like new. Right? So it is always Shashvat. So it is said that in the scriptures that the body goes through 6 kinds of changes. Birth, jayate, existence, that after birth it exists, asti. Growth, that as the child grows, vardate. Then viparinmate. Viparinmate means procreation, that produces children, byproducts. Then apakshyate. Apakshate means that dwindling. And then finally vinashati, which is death. So these are the 6 transformations that happen to the body. It's explained in Bhagavatam 7.7.8. But the soul is immune to all these 6 transformations. It never takes birth. It is always existing. It never changes. So there is no growth, there is no transformation. It is indivisible. It does not produce any byproducts. It never dwindles and it never dies. So the nature of the soul is more fully explained over here. Okay, next verse. Okay, verse 21. Veda vinashinam nityam yayenam achamavyayam katam sa purusha partha kam gatyanti hantikam. O Partha, how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn and immutable kill anyone or cause anyone to kill? So we see one thing interesting over here, that Krishna is also including himself in this verse. So he says, kill anyone or cause anyone to kill. Now Krishna is saying that to Arjun, that while you may be doing the killing, I am the one who's asking you to kill. So just like you may get implicated, so will I. But then he's saying that neither of us will get implicated. Why? Because, and again he repeats the qualities of the soul. Avinashram, that it is indestructible. Nityam, that always existing. Right? Ajam, unborn. Avyayam, immutable. So all these qualities of the soul mean that it can not be destroyed. So this is true for you and this is true for me. So Krishna says that how can a person kill anyone or cause anyone to kill? So it's a rhetorical question. Right? Krishna is not expecting Arjuna to answer. Rhetorical questions are placed for additional emphasis. Right? So the answer is is derived based on what Krishna has said in the earlier part of the verse, that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn, immutable. So essentially what it means, that neither the person who is doing the killing nor the person who is encouraging the killing can always be implicated. Right? Now he says Veda Vinashanam. Right? So Veda is it means the scriptures, but literally Veda means to know. So Veda is important over here because it brings forth 2 points. One, it is applicable to Arjun's confusion. That the reason you are confused is because you do not know. What you don't know? That the soul is eternal. But a person who knows the real nature of the soul can neither kill nor cause anyone to kill. Right? The second understanding of Veda is that a person who knows his duty. So when a person is killing or causing someone to be killed in the line of his prescribed duty, then the person is absolved of any sinful reactions. So Prabhupada expands on this. He says that the justice of peace awards capital punishment to a person condemned for murder. The justice cannot be blamed because he orders violence to another person. Why? Because it is in accordance to the codes of justice. Right? So similarly, when Krishna is ordering Arjun to fight, or when Arjun following the instructions is fighting, that violence is ordained as per the rules of dharma. Prabhupada gives the example also of a doctor, that a doctor may cut open the body of another person, but he is not going to be penalized for that because he is doing it to save the person. So similarly, the violence that is being done by Arjun and indirectly by Krishna is Veda, is in knowledge. It is as per the injunctions of the scriptures. It's for the benefit of everybody. So there is no possibility of sinful reaction. So we'll stop here and resume the discussion from the next verse, which is 22. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.